Okay, a couple of announcements. First of all, the quick thing that in the recording, we're not going to be recording the chat anymore. It's not needed, not necessarily, not needed. It's not necessary. So it's just going to be a video. So if you miss any classes, there won't be chat and details in there. I think it's to do with privacy and confidentiality, just in case somebody writes something that they didn't want to write or regret writing. So as long as I remember that I don't put important information in there for everyone, then that's fine. And if I need to put important information on, I put it on the screen as opposed to writing it down. I can still put our video links in there as long as I put them on the screen as well so that everybody can see them. The other thing is that in assessments, reading a script is not acceptable. Whether it's been passed before by other people, I think it's a general TAFE thing that it doesn't show good practice. And it's not like the workplace. Even if the conversations are perfect and they're scripted perfectly, and it sounds like a workplace, if you clearly look like you're reading a script in a role play, then it's going to get marked unsatisfactory on. If you've memorized the script and it's great, and you're trying to respond to it off the cuff, great. But if it looks like you're reading a script, or you're using a script, or you've got a piece of paper and you keep looking at something for a prompt, then it's not going to work. So that's it. And this session is CHCAOD001, working alcohol and other drugs context. It's provisionally the diploma, but this is in a certificate 4 as well. So it's a bit of an overlap, this module. There's a lot of it, so it might go really, really swiftly over the next couple of weeks. I think we've only got 2 weeks on it, and there's probably 3 or 4 weeks worth of work. So we'll get going with housekeeping. No, the acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayder Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to the land, sea, and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live, and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual, and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respect to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging. It freaked me out there, Liz. I was looking at my big screen and then looked down and there's a beast walking across the screen. It's all right. So, some housekeeping. Cameras on if you're in the room. We're in a classroom together, so we're all interacting together, and microphones on mute or microphones off, so that we don't hear cats or dogs or children or anything that's going on in our rooms. Though we love them all, we don't necessarily want to hear them all at the same time in a class. Class break times, 7 and 8 p.m. should be fine, 10 minutes each. Class participation, when we're interacting, just put your hand up, use the emote icon thing to interact. Be respectful, be mindful and kind with your words, and respect the opinions of others. We're all learners and in this together. And with that, because we're respecting each other, no smoking or vaping on screen, no drinking alcohol on screen, no glasses of wine or stubbies or tins or anything on screen, because we've been respectful to each other. We wouldn't be doing it in a classroom, and also we wouldn't want to trigger anybody else. Tonight, the session, or tonight and next week. The title said it was I've forgotten what it said. It said working alcohol and other drugs contexts. So it's a lot of detail. There's a lot of detail about different substances, the effects on the body, um, and being respectful to you or anybody. If it's too confronting, if it's a trigger for anybody, don't feel ashamed or don't feel weird about just taking some time out, not at break time. Just disappear, a glass of water, walk around outside in the garden, have a cigarette or something like that. I know people and that certain things would be confronting, and I wouldn't want to do that, despite the fact that we've got some subject content to get through, which is really important. It shouldn't mean that people get triggered unconsciously. So with that, no, trigger warning, no emotional triggers for anyone. Just be kind to each other, and be kind to yourself afterwards. So it might be a bit of a roller coaster at times, or we might be rushing. Look after yourself afterwards and look after yourself beforehand. Um, it's difficult, but try and be ready for the session. Um, if you're coming straight in from work and you're jumping straight online onto the Zoom, it's going to be really, really hard. Or if at all you've got any chance to get on 10, 15, 20 minutes before and just watch cat videos or something like that for 10 minutes before you, just to de-stress yourself, it'll help immensely. And maybe do that afterwards as well. Um, so just look after yourself is the main thing. So, um, understanding alcohol and other drugs misuse. By the end of the session, you'll understand classes of drugs and patterns and prevalence of drug use in Australia. So AOD, alcohol and other drugs use, impacts every aspect of a user's life, from their family and work life to their health and sense of self-worth. The cliche of addiction is that when something starts to control every area of our life, and it's not just having a few beers on a Friday night is different to being fully controlled, being fully thinking about alcohol while we're awake every single day. Having 10 to 15 cigarettes a day is one thing, but planning your life, planning your day around your next smoking break, or the next time that you might be possibly not stuck inside a building or a public building where you're not allowed to smoke in there, and trying to calculate everything out like that, plan the day around it, is means that it's controlling a lot of areas of our life. But that's just alcohol and cigarettes. If we're talking about food, or we're talking about gambling or anything else, addiction still comes in there. So, patterns of drug use. So, first of all, it's always going to be experimental, whether it's early teens with cigarettes or alcohol, or it's early 20s and something else, or it's early 30s and something completely different. Experimental is just trying it out, just experimenting, really trying something. Um, the problem is that when we're experimenting, there's often, usually, other people that are way, way past experimenting, and that can tolerate and can deal with way more than we can experiment with. So, like 40 years ago, when my mates are experimenting with alcohol, you're a bit of a wuss because you can't handle what they can handle, but they've been drinking for a while, a few years. So it's not even in the same league. So then it goes beyond experimental, it goes to recreational, social use. Recreational is having fun with it. It's not just experimenting, it's realizing that actually this is kind of fun, whatever it is. And I'm I'm using it to have fun with it. It's At first it brings fun into a situation. So you're going out for dinner with some people, or you're going out for a meal, or you're going to the pub. When you're going to be with your mates, you're going to have a barbecue. So the beers are there because it's recreational. It helps the situation. Um, but eventually it gets beyond that where it's completely turned around. You don't need to be in a barbecue to have a few beers. You don't need anyone else around at all to have a few beers. So it develops as it takes hold. So after recreational, it gets situational. May use amphetamines, for example, prior to exams. So I need I need this to do that, and I can't do that without this. Um, so it goes beyond recreational with the beers for a barbecue. Now I can't go to a barbecue without having a few beers because I get a bit stressed and nobody will like me if I'm like sober. Everybody likes somebody who's had a few beers more. So, I've got to have a few just to get people to like me or talk to somebody or chat up somebody. I need it to survive in that environment. And then it goes beyond situational, intensive, more frequent or harmful use in a range of settings. Um, I think somebody might have had a few before they typed this out. More frequent or harmful use in a range of settings. Um, so it's not just situational, it's actually maybe it's a sneaky something at work. So you've taken everything that you need to use, you've taken it to work, or you've taken it out with you. Um, you're out for a night out, but you're not going to be drinking, going to the movies, but you've got something in your bag or in your pocket just for when you get a chance, because you know you're not going to have a chance to get anything while you're out. And then dependency is hard to control or stop, impacts level of functioning, may experience withdrawal symptoms. Um, so when we are dependent on something, and it could be medication, it could be recreational drugs. When we're dependent on it, there's our body literally tells us that we need it again. Um, it's like having sugar is one thing. When you've had a bit of sugar, then it's difficult to stop once you've had a tiny bit, especially if it's in the lollies or the chocolate or the ice cream that is your favorite. You can't just have a tiny, tiny bit. Not many people can. I've seen a couple of people that can eat a square of chocolate and put it down for a couple of days and then no, and then go back for another one. And it would take me the same amount of time to eat one square as it would a whole bar. Um, and it's difficult to regulate use. So it's hard to control stop use, and it impacts level of functioning, meaning that the dependency might make us tired, irritable, um, sad, um, happy, um, all sorts of emotions that we wouldn't necessarily feel because of being dependent on that, whatever it is. And then we may experience withdrawal symptoms as well. Uh, 24 hours without caffeine. I only have 3 coffees a day. If I go 24 hours without caffeine, pretty bad head. If I keep going, the headache gets worse. If I keep going, I get pretty angry, exhausted, and caffeine's not really that strong compared to other drugs and medications. But dependency and withdrawal symptoms can be really, really nasty, especially when we're talking alcohol and heroin, which is just another league completely. Drug groups, not social groups or therapy groups, but the types of drugs. So we've got analgesics, painkillers, but can be misused. Inhalants, gases or fumes inhaled. Opioids, opiates or narcotics. Painkiller produced from poppy plants for synthetically use. Party drugs, stimulants, and hallucinogens used to enhance the party experience. And pretty much anything will fall into these groups. So performance and image enhancing drugs increase sporting ability. Pretty much anything can enhance sporting ability sometimes. Prescription drugs used inappropriately can cause long-term harm. Psychoactive drugs affect thinking, feeling, and how people behave. Synthetic drugs develop to bypass drug laws, similar effects to illegal drugs sold online. Classes of drugs: depressants, hallucinogens, and stimulants. Depressants slow or depress the functioning of the central nervous system, slows down our nervous system, so we feel slower, a bit more down, a bit blue, calmer sometimes is the main effect. Hallucinogens affect the sense, changes how a user sees, hears, tastes, smells, or feels things. And stimulants stimulates the functioning of the central nervous system. And you might have medication that fits into certain categories here as well. So, no, it's not moving. Okay, so it's just stalled. I'm not sure why. Depressants, first of all. Alcohol is the major. When we think of a depressant drug, alcohol would be the key one. It reduces the ability to concentrate and coordinate the body functions, and it reduces the ability to respond to what is happening around them. Alcohol, cannabis, opioids. So this is things that are affected by alcohol. Size, weight, and health is not just affected by alcohol, but as it is affecting how the alcohol is impacts the body, if you understand that. Sorry. So if we're smaller, the alcohol is going to have a different effect to somebody that's larger. The same amount of alcohol is going to be have a different effect. You probably understand that. If the person is acclimatized to the drug, so they can tolerate it, it's weird that despite being a very tiny person or being a very large person, if the tiny person has tolerated the alcohol and they've got grown a tolerance to it, then you get a smaller female that is apparently able to drink a huge footy player under the table because there's a certain tolerance there that's grown up over time. Also, other drugs taken at the same time affects the use. So that's why doctors will tell us just be careful what you're using, what you're taking, what with what. With some drugs or medications, alcohol will increase or intensify what it's meant to do. And with other drugs and medication, alcohol will reduce what the medication is trying to do. So we've got to be careful. Um, and how much of the stuff that is taken also affects and the strength of what's used. Low versus high doses. Low doses reduced inhibitions, enhanced mood, reduced anxiety, slow reaction time. Then high doses, vomiting, coma, death, blackouts, and memory loss. Basically, high dose, they're mentioning an overdose here, really. So, depressants research is the first thing to do. Um, listing alcohol, benzos, cannabis, GHB, ketamine, opioids. Pick one and find out what you can about it. So that would be, I'll put in the chat some prompts about what to look for.
Are we going to write our answers in the chat or just tell you?
No, no, you write them down. We're not going to go into breakout rooms for this. It's just personal study. So, name of substance, class, um, clientele. That's good to remember. Don't know whether I've spelt that right, but you know what I mean. Um, clientele means who would use it, who are the most popular users of it. Effects, um, cost, financial, not emotional cost or anything like that. All right, there you go. And what time is it now? It's 6:26 in New South Wales. So let's go to 6:35, 6:35, 10 minutes. That's 10 minutes everywhere, isn't it, Sky? Okay. With skies, codeine. Where did you get that from, Sky?
I beg your pardon?
Where did you find that?
My
All
current
the
workplace,
okay.
one
Yeah.
of our many brochures, and then the fentanyl one I actually Googled myself and went to the NT Gov Health, and then I went to DAS's website for the fentanyl one.
Okay. So we've got adolescents and young adults for codeine. That's if that's the most common clientele, then that's fair enough. Yeah, I've known a lot of older middle-aged people that are addicted to codeine because of pain, um, which um, which makes them feel like I shouldn't be addicted to it because I'm old. Because I'm older, I'm an adult. I shouldn't be caught up in addiction because that's for young people. That's for people in a different social class. Some people in a lower social class. Um, Maybe these people are middle-aged men, women that they're not expecting to be hooked on something like codeine, though it could be a bad leg, a knee replacement is needed, so they're just in pain all the time, or arthritis in the hands, bad back, slip discs in the back, and they're wanting to get rid of the pain, so they started to take increasing amounts of codeine, and then increasing amounts brings tolerance, and it doesn't work as well as it used to anymore. So there wasn't an easy answer to get out of it. Does anybody get any others?
I think for us, we class those elderly people, like you just explained, like the poly drug users, because they've got the codeine, but then they also got some other
Yes.
prescription for their arthritis, and then they've got another prescription for this and
Yeah.
this. You know, that's what we class them at my workplace.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Where a young bloke might be just uh, playing with it just on its own because it doesn't want to use anything else because they don't bring the same effect, or it might reduce the effects. What else has anyone got?
I did alcohol. What do you want to know?
What did you find as the most common users? Like, who would?
There's a chart here. The most common users, it's got 18 to 20-year-old, but also 21 to
Okay.
25-year-old.
Yeah.
But it's also got countries. Certain countries actually
Okay. Yeah.
drink
Yeah.
more alcohol than others as well. So yeah, certain. So the number one, it's got Romania is number one. Australia doesn't come into it, so
Wow.
that's good in the top 10. So that's all right. But yeah, Romania, Georgia,
Wow.
Czech Republic. So they're all the top three. But yeah,
What's it measuring when you say that?
it's got the list
When
of
you say they're the
countries,
top, what are they measuring?
the countries that drink the most alcohol. So
Right.
that's from a .org website. Top 15 countries with the highest alcohol consumption.
Okay.
So
Wow.
yeah. But alcohol costs. There's 2.6 million deaths globally due to alcohol.
That is a lot.
But I've got more information. Depends on what you want to know.
Cost. Did you find anything like what's the
Cost,
cheapest alcohol you can find?
not as in cost. I didn't find anything as in money, but the
Yeah.
costs, like psychologically, Well, besides long-term and short-term effects, which I can go into, but it affects everything, your friendships, your work, relationships, family, like it costs you. Yeah, but I didn't find out cost as in price. So,
Okay. So we've got alcohol, codeine, fentanyl. Anyone else? Thea, did you get anything?
Hi, Dwayne. I looked at cannabis because it is the most highest consumed illegal drug in Australia. So it was very evident
Okay,
that
thanks.
people older age, 40 to 60, is more likely to smoke daily, while younger people will do it occasionally. So that was quite new for me.
Wow. Where was your source? Where did you find yours?
I just Googled it. What is the
Yeah.
most highest used drug in Australia?
Do you know the website that it was linked to?
I'll put it in the box because I'll have to go back on my phone.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. If even if it's not an assessment, if it's good to know where you've got it from. Like whether it is it a government website, is it drug supporting website, or is it a foreign website? Foreign makes it sound like a foreign language, but no, I'm meaning, is it an Australian one or a non-Australian one? Yeah, it's good to know where you're getting the information from. And there's a Rachel here. Have you got anything? All right. Okay, so that's depressants. That's one area, one one small area of all of the recreational drug use that we know of. So moving on, alcohol, short-term effects, relaxation, double vision, disturbed sexual functioning, and disturbed sleep patterns. Long-term effects, brain damage, dementia, liver cirrhosis, oral, throat, and breast cancers, and some forms of heart disease and stroke. So that's it can be pretty drastic. The As far as I know, as far as I'm aware, with long-term effects of alcohol as well, once you get dependent on it, there's no you've got to be medically removed from it. When you go to the doctor and he gives you medication and he says, okay, just be careful with it. And you have to, it's so strong that you have to reduce it and reduce it and reduce it gradually to get off it because it's having that much effect on your body. Alcohol and heroin are both the same, they're the same type of issue. If our tolerance to alcohol has got so high, then it's really dangerous to just stop cold turkey. Which is why people need to go to detox with heavy use, even before going into a rehab. A lot of rehabs, when they hear that somebody's been using alcohol for a long, long time, they'll say, "Okay, you need to go to detox first, just to make sure that there's no medical problems." Because even though the rehabs are wanting to help people, they don't want somebody coming in and then um, withdrawing from the alcohol and being really, really ill as soon as they go into the rehab. It's not, especially when it can be really, really dangerous and it's life threatening sometimes. So, opioids, short term effects, constipation, dizziness, dry mouth, and itching. Long term effects, increased cognitive function, dependence, gastrointestinal bleeding, mental health conditions. And then once there's certain effects from one substance that you're taking, then you might need to take something else to accommodate for that. So opioids, not just constipation, but long-term use, you might hemorrhoids, and dealing with hemorrhoids regularly is what I know. Like if you're 35 and you're a footy player and you've been taking opioids for a while, it's not nice to have to deal with hemorrhoids as well. So there's different things that they need to accommodate for that. Health effects of illicit opioids, specifically heroin. There's plenty of opioids, but this one, heroin, analgesia, suppressed coughing, drowsiness, dry mouth, euphoria. Long-term effects, impotence in males, irregular menstrual periods in females, loss of appetite and weight, memory impairment, mental health issues, including depression. Health effects of cannabis, short-term dizziness with impaired balance, feelings of hunger, increased heart rate, mild euphoria, reduced inhibitions, and long-term effects, cardiovascular, that's your heart and lungs, system change, mental health conditions, physical dependence, poor adolescent psychosocial development. And that was, I was very interested when Thea mentioned that 40 to 60 regular use, age 40 to 60 regular use, and the young people are more dabbling, recreational or experimenting. So before we go to tolerance and dependence, there's a couple of videos. I don't know whether. So tolerance and dependence. So tolerance is basically, oh, it says it here, requires bigger doses of the substance to get the same effect. That's whether you're using every day or you're using every few days. Gradually, our tolerance goes up to something. Whether that's a painkiller, whether that's alcohol. If with a painkiller, if the pain isn't actually going away, because it could be nerve pain or something, and it's not possible to reduce the inflammation, or the knee isn't getting better, or the cut isn't healing up. If the pain doesn't go away, then our body will need more and more of the painkiller to reduce the pain, because we'll eventually get dependent on it. No, we'll eventually get to be able to tolerate it, which is why we're told even paracetamol or ibuprofen, low-level painkillers, we're meant to not use them for very long, really, because our body can grow to tolerate them, so that we need more, we increase the dose, we need more, we increase the dose, and the pain just isn't going away. Dependence is when our body isn't necessarily tolerating it, but our body can't do without it. Like when I mentioned alcohol earlier on, our body has decided that this new thing is vital to stay alive, and goes into a weird shutdown when we can't get hold of it. So depressants can be psychological and physically addictive. So we would usually say that physically addictive would be the dependence. The psychologically addictive would be normally what we say as addiction. And that would be how we would differentiate both. Dependence and addiction. Dependence is the physical thing, and addiction is the psychological thing. Physical dependence, the body adapts and acclimatizes to functioning with the depressant present. Stimulants, increased speed of nerve messages between brain and body, because they're stimulating huge areas of the brain to work faster, work better for some things, and work in a way that we wouldn't have normally had. Even caffeine. So that we can function in the morning, anything like that. But cocaine, speed, ice, ADHD medication are all in this area. Or some ADHD medication, sorry. Methamphetamine, meth. And it's no, we'll keep going. Amphetamines, big burst of energy, increased in heart rate and breathing, high blood pressure, hypertension, dry mouth and jaw clenching. Long-term effects, amphetamine psychosis, extreme weight loss and malnutrition, dry mouth and dental problems, regular infections such as cold and flu. With long-term use of ice, with a long-term high from use, so lots and lots of highs from using ice, crystal meth, the muscles can go into spasm, so it's hard to coordinate. It's different to alcohol because where alcohol is a depressant and it makes your body relaxed and almost floppy if there's too much. With ice, the muscles can tense up, and it's hard to do fine motor skills and use your fingers because most of your arms or legs are tensed up, or your jaw might clench up, and your teeth might grind. And with a lot of use, you're grinding your teeth away, or you're getting a lockjaw because the muscles in your jaw are so tight. And eventually, there's very little tooth left. So researching amphetamines, yes, but I'll give you a video to research. And there's some general research. So we've done depressants, stimulants, and gone on to hallucinogens now. Also known as psychedelics. They change an individual's perception, mood, and cognitive processes. Can cause hallucinations. Many types occur naturally in plants, such as mushrooms, etc., or they're manufactured. A good overview of hallucinogens with ecstasy. It used to be called ecstasy or nicknames when like 30 years ago, eckies or pills specifically. Now the chemical name is used, so people might not say ecstasy, but that's what they mean. They might be talking about MDMA, which would be a more common name to use now with the young people. We've got ecstasy, hallucinogen, ecstasy, LSD, and cannabis as well. It mentioned that cannabis stays in for up to a week. It's more commonly thought to stay in the body for up to 3 months. So you can still test for cannabis a couple of months after the last use, which messes up urine tests, and it messes up all sorts of testing when people say they haven't smoked it in the past month or 6 weeks. Well, it'll stay in your body for a lot longer than that. So for people to be aware of that when they're coming off it as well. It's still affecting like up to 3 months afterwards, which is a shame, but that's just the way it is. So moving on. Understanding Australia's drinking, smoking, and drug habits. Maybe we'll watch the video later. So National Drug Strategy Household Survey in 2019 said smoking in 2019, smoking decreased to 11%. So this was just before COVID. What I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, wasn't COVID like the beginning of 20? Nod, shake, vague remembrances, or something like that. So just before COVID, smoking had decreased to 11%. This is household. There's no age limits on there. That's how vague it is. E-cigarette smoking increased. Ex-drinkers increased to 9%. 25% of Australians involved in risky drinking once a month. Risky drinking isn't drinking in a dangerous place or on top of a multi-story car park or anything like that. It's potentially binge drinking. So it would be drinking an extreme amount of alcohol that wouldn't normally be intaked every now and again. Illicit use of codeine, halved to 1.5% since becoming prescription only. Increase in cannabis, 11.6%, cocaine, 4.2%, and ecstasy, 3%. The number of under 14s using illicit drugs was decreasing. So that's the type of thing when somebody says something and it's cannabis is used regularly by 40 to 60-year-olds. Okay, cool. Who said that? Where did you find that out? Because some people might make it up. Some people might twist information. Some people might take a survey or a government report and make it work for their own ends. So that is a government report. And of course, a government report is going to tell the perfect truth. Not always, unfortunately. Sometimes we need to go and check and see what else it's saying. So methamphetamine use in Australia in about 10 years ago to 5 years ago, it was the fastest growing drug in use. So what's that? That's like 2015 to 20. It was the use basically because it was getting supplied so quickly and so easily. And because of the supply, it was coming down in price. People were dealing outside high schools, and it was so commonly used that it was hard to stop. And there was more people going into detox and rehabs with ice addiction, more and more and more. So meth or amphetamine decrease 14 and over from 3.4% to 1.3% in 2019. That's great. That's a big drop. Australia is the highest average total of stimulant consumption when compared to 28 countries across Europe, Oceania, and South Africa. 2021, meth accounted for 8.2% of all drug-related hospitalizations of 12,400, down from 2019 figures. Increase in deaths 4 times higher than 2000. Excuse me. Hold on a minute. I don't understand that. Increase in deaths 4 times higher than 2000. What? I thought this was a 2019 survey. Am I reading this wrong? Can anybody tell? You need to check that if you're going to comment. Just go on.
Isn't it from 2019 to 2021?
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's what it must mean. Increase in deaths 4 times higher than the year 2000. Yes. Sorry. I'm going to pretend it's because it's late, not because I'm stupid. But But in my brain, I think I was thinking 2019 comes before 2000. I think that's what I was thinking.
Just need a coffee there, love.
I
Oh,
read that
heck,
as
this time of night,
I read it as year 2000, like
Yeah.
straight off.
there was no confusion there. It was written correctly. It was just me not reading it right. So in 2020 to 21, amphetamines, the second most common principal drug of concern in treatment. So that was, yeah, I didn't know it was that late. I was talking 2015 to 20, but it still kept growing then. So changes in drug use in the last 20 years. In early 2000s, people aged 20 to 29 most likely to use illicit drugs, smoked and drank alcohol. Fair enough. By 2019, alcohol and drug use shifted to people in their 40s because we'd all grown up a bit. Stabilized for those in their 30s and fell for people under 30. Alcohol, people aged 40 to 50, one and a half, one. That's not one and a half.
1 in 5 people drinking at an unsafe level.
Thank you. I'll just click through the slides and you can read them. Yes. 1 in 5 then. Okay. Alcohol, people aged 40 to 50, 1 in 5 drinking at unsafe levels. Fair enough. Cool. You've got to stay awake, Sky, because we'll all be confused because I am. 2001 to 2019, number of young adults 18 to 29 who do not drink at all has more than doubled. That's good. 2001 to 2019. And then COVID happens and you couldn't get certain things, but you could get alcohol, you could get cigarettes, couldn't get vapes as easily. So 2021, in the past 5 years, I reckon it would be great to know statistics to compare. I wouldn't be able to understand them, but it'd be nice to look at them. So young Indigenous Australians 14 plus. Whoops. Indigenous Australians aged 14 plus were slightly more likely to abstain from drinking alcohol than non-Indigenous in 2019. That's brilliant.
Can we stop the recording for 1 second?
Sure. All right, there's one short video that I'm going to put on screen for reference that is not necessarily important right now, but it comes into the topic. So we're mentioning the statistics. It's based on understanding Australia's drinking, smoking, and drug habits with that survey that we're talking about. And now I think about it, it's the 2019 survey, which is 19 years after year 2000, not close to it. So that's a watch video later. And also specific types of people that the survey mentions. LGBTIQ people in that community are more likely to engage in substance use than those who identify as heterosexual. And that will narrow down into, okay, which substance? Also, people with mental health issues. For someone who has a predisposition to psychotic illness, such as schizophrenia, using illicit drugs could trigger the first episode in a lifelong mental illness. And that when it says, just sorry, any sec, yeah. When it says using illicit drugs, what they're meaning specifically, it's a veiled reference to cannabis, but whether the cannabis whether the cannabis causes schizophrenia or whether the schizophrenia was already there and it's brought out, we don't really know, but they do go hand in hand quite a lot of times. And once it's like it's triggered almost by the pot, it's really it's a difficult life ahead after then. And the cliche is that with many things, with mental health, the cliche that you might hear a lot is that genetics loads the gun and environment pulls the trigger. So the schizophrenia might have been there genetically, but the environment, whether it's drugs or substance abuse, is part of the environment that could have pulled the trigger. And yes, go on, Sky. What were you going to say?
Did I miss it? Was I not paying attention? Why are the LGBTQ people more likely to engage?
I don't know, and I don't know engage in what. So I said engage in what? I don't necessarily know whether there's any link with specific substances. My mind's just guessing now, unfortunately. Like, what are they using? Are they more likely to smoke? Are they more likely to drink? Cocaine? I don't know. Yeah, go on, Rachel. You might have some info. Yes.
Just a guess, and no idea, but just a guess that they say that this community tend to engage in substance use more than others is because of the social acceptance or non-acceptance, or it could be that they have better parties. I don't know, but I'd say it's to do with what they mean here is to do with acceptance, which is a lot different these days with acceptance to what it was going back when they probably come up with this. This probably doesn't even stand for today. It's probably years ago. That's just my take on it anyway.
That was my thought as well, but it seems a bit like biased. Doesn't seem very factual.
Don't open a can of worms now, Scott.
So I'm thinking straight away, and I think Rachel put it better, that I would have said the LGBT community feeling ostracized are more likely to self-medicate. That's what I would have said. And that could be put more politely, like Rachel said it, but it's also, my mind is also going off onto a lot of the LGBT community that I know that are more affluent, higher economic status, are using a lot of cocaine because they live in the city and they're that's their area.
I'm trying to Google the answer to that question.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. But from both our take, it seems like some people are having better parties than others.
Yeah. It's the self-medicate because they're dealing with their identity and issues and whatever else. And then the stereotype, nice, pretty colors, Mardi Gras got better parties.
Quite possibly. Have you got anything, Liz?
Yeah, it says findings. This is from PubMed Central. So I don't know. I think it's an American thing, but it says findings from recent research suggest that lesbians and bisexual women are at greater risk for alcohol and drug use disorders and related problems, and that gay and bisexual men are at greater risk for illicit drug use and related problems. And it also says down here, no, I just had it, now I've lost it, to do with basically what I think Sky or Rachel said, I can't remember, about the, oh, okay. It's got here, LGB populations characteristics do not appear as robust protective factors. Hold on. Bisexual identity and behaviour in particular seem to be related to increased risk for substance abuse. It doesn't say why though.
And I think
okay.
why is what we were saying before. whereas
I
the
agree.
social acceptance or non-acceptance, and I think a lot of that could also come down sky to culture. So down here, the culture is way different to what you have up there. And a lot of that would be to do with religion and culture, where they're not accepted by their own families even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare have just criticized me. There's supposed to be a plus at the end of that Q. And the AIHW have said because it's the social and mental health stresses, they face the discrimination and the stigma. So they've got higher levels of stress, anxiety, and they self-medicate. That I don't know how to internalization of homophobia. Again, they self-medicate. The social network, they may have higher rates of substance abuse due to the social norm and stigma associated by the LGBTQI community, and the accessibility and availability is in those social spaces more higher to contribute to the more higher contribution rate to their pubs, bars, and clubs. That feels like a stereotype. But
I've got information from the Australian Government Institute of Health and Welfare, and it says because of what Sky just said, the increased stigma and discrimination, family issues, and lack of support.
Right. So this, that's probably from this 2019 survey. So this, all the statistics that we're looking at on the slides, that's the 2019 one, and it's not that long ago. It's close enough time to be able to use all of that data now. But like COVID and the lockdown and everything that happened just switched all of the parameters. So literally anything could be now taken as what is the new statistics? What is the new information? They really need to do another exploration after COVID to figure out what's going on now. I was going to go off on a tangent then, but I'm not going to. I'm going to move on because I'll keep waffling. So, people with mental health issues are more likely to. So, this is where we're talking about comorbidity or co-occurring. So, the problem when somebody walks into a rehab or a detox, when somebody walks into a detox or a rehab, because they're struggling with a substance issue, the problem is not the problem. There's always something else. Excuse me. So comorbidity and co-occurring. It's never just one. And these are all linked as well. Some people, fascinating, unfortunately, that some people who use one thing will never use something else. And some people that can get really addicted or love using this thing would never want to use this other thing. And then you start to get a social structure and I've mentioned it before, a social structure in addiction that, yeah, but I'm better than you because I've never done that. Or I'm better than you because I only drink. I don't snort. I don't eat it. I don't inject it. You're a low life because I only drink it. Though I've messed up so many parts of my life, at least I'm not like you. Or there's the other way around where people are saying, for cannabis, yeah, but at least I'm not like you guys that ruin society. That my drug's at least not going to, it messes me up a bit, but it's not going to ruin society like heroin and alcohol does. And it's a shame that when people are trying to get well, it's almost a pacifier that if I make if I make myself feel better about what I'm doing, then it's not as I don't have to deal with as many consequences and it's as much of the issue that I should be. So we've got smoking, cannabis use, methamphetamine use, drinking alcohol at risky levels, and any illicit drug. Patterns and prevalence. Anonymous online trading platforms and crypto markets enable the purchase of illicit goods and services. A recent study of crypto markets recorded by the National Drug and Alcohol Research Centre showed that illicit drugs most commonly listed for sale to Australia in 2019-20 were cannabis 30%, MDMA 13%, cocaine 9%, and methamphetamine 6%. It's basically online, getting it online. 757. Australian guidelines to reduce risk about drinking alcohol, harm minimisation. So looking at harm minimisation, there was, trying to remember off the top of my head, there's harm reduction, supply reduction, and oh damn, forgotten the third one. But you can Google that, research that. Guideline 1, healthy men and women should drink no more than 10 standard drinks a week and no more than 4 standard drinks on any one day. Guideline 2, children and people under 18 years of age should not drink alcohol. And, sorry, when I was young, the grandparents used to regularly rub their finger in whiskey or put whiskey in the bottom of a baby's bottle. And that was normal. That was okay. Especially when they're teething, like put your finger in the whiskey and rub it on the gums, which is, yeah. Guideline 3, to prevent harm from alcohol to their unborn child, women who are pregnant or planning a pregnancy should not drink alcohol. So there's ads on TV now about the most important drink you drink is the one that you don't drink or something like that for pregnant women. For women who are breastfeeding, not drinking alcohol is the safest baby.
That's just been made mandatory across all of Australia. I'd seen them on multiple bottles, but it was just strongly suggested to have that on your alcohol until quite recently, within the last 18 months, it became a rule across all of Australia wide to have that.
Wow. Didn't know that a federal law that has been run out across the whole of Australia. Who'd have thought that?
Sometimes they get themselves organized.
Yeah, clearly. This is opioid use disorder causes of death. I think that's supposed to be a video, but it's 8 o'clock anyway. Okay, let's come back at 10 past 8. 10 minutes, that is. So this is the drug class, the legal drug class, where it's a controlled drug. So when any drug is meant to be controlled because of the potential harm that it could do to individuals or society, then the government's decided it needs to be controlled. So the class of a controlled drug is intended to reflect the harm associated with it. Parliament determines the relevant class based on the recommendations of the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs. This classification in turn determines the penalties that are available to the courts when sentencing. So, Class A drugs, if you know all this, I'm sorry, but it's important just in case you don't. If you didn't know it, then it's worth knowing. Class A drugs, that's most of the drugs that we've been talking about tonight. Heroin, cocaine, what we call hard drugs, that's Class A. And Class B is mostly heavy medications and cannabis. Obviously, based on some users and some people in government, there's a disagreement about different drugs and where they should go, especially cannabis. That it should be dropped down to Class C. And Class C is the low level, well, there, benzosteroids, buprenorphine. I can't even say that one. Buprenorphine. I'm going to say it. Bupe is what we call it. That's the nickname. The low-level recreational drugs that a lot of people say are relatively harmless, but they're not relatively harmless because they're a controlled drug. They're still a controlled drug. Then the Home Secretary can make a temporary class drug order under the Misuse of Drugs Act, should there be a substance that is causing sufficient concern with regards to harm. So, for instance, we've got 3 classes of drugs. Most of the drugs that we know are all in them 3 classes. But then every now and again, there's some slightly different street drug or slightly new drug, an intense caffeine drink or something that's so strong that it's not just a caffeine drink anymore, or it's when vaping came out because of the difference that you could the adjustability, I guess, it was a new street thing, so it needed to be regulated at first. And the TCDO will put in place for a period of 12 months. During or at the end of the 12-month period, the TCDO is subject to parliamentary review. The parliamentary review involves an independent report given by the ACMD who detail the concerns. So that's the way a drug goes up and down on the CBA, ABC, and it could move from B to C, and then different governing bodies, different agencies and services are saying actually this drug is actually more harmful than we first thought, so we'll move it up from C to B or B to A. So that's that anyway. The next video is about addiction specifically. It's a very good video. It's by a guy called Gabor Mate. He's a psychiatrist, a GP. He's a brilliant guy. He's written a lot of books and he's done a lot of videos. And he's very, very. When you hear AOD mentioned, any studies or anything like that, Gabor Mate he's the man. So that's the video, the best explanation of addiction I've ever heard. And I'll put the link.
Why didn't we get this guy's cheat code information at the beginning of this course?
Say that again, sorry.
How come we didn't get this guy's information at the beginning of the course as a cheat guide?
I don't know. Do you know of him?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right, there's 10 minutes. Far out, it's 8:15. Okay, so we'll come back. This will be a talk about thing, so we'll come back at 27 minutes past 8 Sydney time. Sky, you liked it? Is that what you were saying? Right.
Yeah, I liked it. It was a good one. It was, a different take that very much fits the real world. So I liked it. It wasn't clinical and medical and professional and taken away from the human experience or anything like that. I enjoyed it.
Which is weird because he's a GP, he's a psychiatrist, he's a medical professional, and he's saying that the medical way of looking at addiction is wrong, which is interesting.
So he said psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So he was when he mentioned Vancouver and he said thousands of people, and when people are scientists and the doctors, then they need to be careful with what they're saying, But he said all of the people, all of the men, all of the women, that's thousands. And he ran an injecting room in Vancouver as well as part of what he was doing in the hospital, because people were dying because of transmitted diseases and dirty needles. So he opened one of the first injecting rooms in Vancouver. So he's saying that all of the people that he's dealt with are all traumatized. And he's saying that just about him. But then how many, when we look at all of the statistics that we've been looking at tonight, whether it's LGB community, more likely to use than the heterosexual community, whether it's the Indigenous community, more likely to drink and trying to deal with issues around the alcohol and trying to hide it, or it's certain age groups addicted to codeine, or it's certain age groups addicted to cannabis. He's saying that addiction is about trauma. He said that addiction is a problem. Addiction is an answer to a problem that somebody couldn't figure out how to get off themselves, which means that all of these communities, thousands and thousands of people, are dealing with trauma. So, like I mentioned earlier on, the problem is not the problem. And there's comorbidity and there's co-occurring things. So without me waffling on, he's done a lot of work with different types of addiction, and he's published studies that he's done, which are fed into different studies the government look at. But in the end, governments, whether it's Australia, America, Canada, in the end, they've got budgets to keep and try and deal with crime on a massive scale rather than looking at trauma. They've got to deal with the amount of, and it's meant to be looked at next week. I don't know whether we'll get to it, but the amount of money that the government has to put into fight certain fight specific substance abuses, whether that's medical or recreational, the amount of money that the government wastes doing that is the bigger problem in their eyes. So it's easier to just criminalize everybody that's breaking the law, unfortunately, and create laws so that people break them. That's partly what he was saying. You're allowed to drink yourself into oblivion and drink yourself to death. You can smoke and smoke cigarettes and kill yourself like that. But people have created laws around other substances that mean that they're going to get caught out straight away because of what they're using. So with that, the last thing to look at, when he's talking about addiction, most of the stuff that we're looking at, most of the substances we're looking at, they affect dopamine in our brain. And it's been mentioned a couple of times with different substances that it kicks the dopamine, that it increases the dopamine, or it slows down the dopamine. When we get a shot of dopamine in our brain, it's like the achievement that we achieved something really good, and we've done it. So when we get a shot of dopamine in our brain, that naturally comes from things like here on the screen. Lots of things can stimulate dopamine, like sex, exercise, nicotine and cigarettes, recreational drugs like heroin or cocaine, While sex promotes the natural release of dopamine, drugs can trigger an abundant amount of dopamine. So what, because addiction isn't about the substance, it's not about the cocaine, it's not about the pot or the alcohol, it's about the dopamine. When we're looking at dopamine, that means that if something triggers the dopamine, you can literally get addicted to it, which is why in AOD policy, alcohol and other drugs policy, we're talking about gambling as well. And we talk about it explores into porn addiction as well. It explores into food addiction. Anything that can kick our dopamine. My favorite chocolate bar, my favorite ice cream. I'm talking seriously. My favorite donuts that trigger the dopamine in my brain. That's the one path to an addiction. So, however, when you're up that high and riding on the dopamine wave, you've got further to fall. So the intensity that some substances give us in the intensity of that dopamine hit, when you come crashing down, that's a massive crash. The intense high, when you crash after that, after a long use, you're talking about using antidepressants just to deal with the fact that you've gone from so high into a massive crash. And doctors will genuinely prescribe antidepressants because of the crashes that can happen. So drugs trick the brain into chemically thinking that they're good for us. If touching a hot stove released dopamine and triggered its feel-good response, many more of us would be walking around with burn bandages. Drugs are dangerous, but dopamine's response tells our brain that they feel good. So Rachel mentioned about the razor blades. When we're talking about addiction, we think alcohol, okay, because most of the time it might taste great. Sugar tastes great. Razor blades don't feel great until somebody is addicted to cutting themselves because of the release in the body. And we don't understand it until we start to talk to somebody that does do it, where there's an addiction, a literal addiction to doing something that at first hurts or brings pain, but then eventually there's an addiction attached to it. Is there a way to quantify the most dopamine releasing drug? People were talking about cocaine at first, but then ice, meth is the mother of them all in reference to drugs that produce powerful dopamine surges. Perhaps this shouldn't come as a surprise since meth is also associated with one of the highest relapse rates. People are doing really, really well. They've been off it for a while, but then they relapse because they just need one more. And that's bad enough with alcohol and heroin. People can go years without alcohol and then 5 years later they have a drink and they're back to where they were. With heroin, they've been off it for a few months and they need one more shot and they overdose. The report indicates that all addictive substances trigger a dopamine release, but at different amounts. For instance, alcohol will produce a dopamine surge on par with a cigarette. Cocaine, on the other hand, produces a much larger release of dopamine. Sugar produces a massive release of dopamine. It's not that sugar is less than illegal drugs. Sugar's powerful. And without going into too much detail there, it's almost 20 to 8. So that's almost it. And for a recap, where did that go? Recap. I'll go to the beginning. It's easier. So recap, classes of drugs. So the type, as in the class of stimulant, depressant, hallucinogen, or even the legal controlled class, A, B, or C. And patterns of prevalence are used in Australia. Remembering that was the 2019 study. If you have to do any study on it, it's going to be interesting to know what's happened since then. So that is pretty much it. So, yeah, mine too, Liz. I'll stop the recording for